Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Karl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion or simply want to ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to invite you to join our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that would resonate with and challenge us and our fellow seekers here in the desert.
We believe that a key to the journey is to keep asking good questions, and we believe that all stories are sacred.
Our hope is that you will find life and healing for your body and mind, and that you will be able to be where you are and be who you are.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand. I'm here with Karl Forehand, and we do have a special guest today. But before we get started with that, do you have anything you want to tell our listening audience?
Yeah, I guess this one's coming out pretty soon, so it'll still be effective. The Leaning Forward conference is done, but back in early December, but the videos are just now being rolled out for that. So they're premiering all this month of December, and this will air in January. So by January 5th or something like that, they should be all there. But we're also re-engineering them all for a podcast starting in February. So after you hear this, be looking for those out there. I would mention donations since we haven't had any donations. Mm-hmm. But every time I ask for donations to help offset costs, when I try to promote the YouTube, it goes down instead of up. So I may just leave it alone for now. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to hear a story, right?
Yeah, we're here to talk with Brigette Gildemaster, and she is a survivor turned advocate. She is a space holder for those hurting, and she is on a mission to live braver with out loud authenticity and deep connection to humans. Welcome to the podcast, Brigette.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.
You said you're also from the Midwest. We are as well. We're from Northwest Missouri. So the places you mentioned that where you have lived are places that we've spent time and been around. So we're kind of around that area, so we can relate to you. But I don't know how many years ago we started this. How many was it's?
I don't know, 4 or 5.
4 or 5 years ago. We've got about 300 episodes now. We'd love to hear all the stories of, mm-hmm. And we really, what's the right word I want to use? I don't know. It's an honor for us to hear people's stories. We take it very seriously, but we've also learned from it. Mm-hmm. Our last book, Leaning Forward, had kind of the lessons we compiled from the people we've heard from and the stories we've heard, and we look at it as most of our education, along with the books we read and mm-hmm. other things we do. But Brigette, we want to hear your story. We want to just in whatever detail, whatever part of it you want to tell. And you got all the time you want. So have at it.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, that's, I love what you said there. That's such a beautiful testament about stories because I feel mine is the same. I've recently started my own podcast and started to record as well. And hearing other people's stories is so much more impactful along with those facts because they just back up everything. It just makes it real and tangible. So that's awesome. I love that. I had no idea you had so many episodes. So that's amazing. I've heard some of them, but yeah, that's awesome. So good for you guys. So that's great. Well, again, thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Brigette Gildemaster, and I love sharing my story. I feel like it's impacted a lot of people, or a lot of women specifically. I grew up in high control religion and ended up divorcing a pedophile down the road, which I think greatly contributed to that happening, just with the way my mindset was and stuff. So grew up majorly in high patriarchy. So I had a very specific place and role as a woman with, being submissive to my father until being married, which didn't play out quite that way, but it was always there. It was always that underlying tone. And so, and then also in purity culture. So that shaped a lot of my view of marriage and a sex life and what to look for in a spouse. And contributed just to all of that. So I think it's a huge part of how I grew up as well, having those beliefs. So I got married to my first husband around 21, 22. And I was living in South Dakota at the time, and we moved to North Dakota. So yeah, all in that Midwest, we were all up and down. And, things were great, young bride, happy, excited, all the things. In marital counseling, it had come out that he had a porn addiction, which growing up in purity culture is like, yeah, okay, we all have problems, no big deal, right? We'll work it out and get through it. And the only question asked of me is if I was okay with that. I was okay that he had admitted that. And the only question asked of him pretty much was that he was going to stop and knew it was wrong. And that's where it was left. And so, very naively went into a marriage not knowing what the true ramifications of that would mean, and that someone just doesn't stop when they have a problem like that without true counsel and therapy and a mindset shift. And so 3 weeks into my marriage, it started up again. So I was crying, going to sleep every night, just begging why I wasn't enough, where, this was my value. This is all I had been looking forward to, was getting married, feeling like I had arrived. And, it finally got into the ultimate, adulthood, getting married. That's what my goal was. And then not being valued in that way for my husband just crushed me. And so this went on for a long time. He'd say he stopped and then he didn't. I'd find out though that he was, masturbating at work 4 and 5 times a day. It was just heartbreaking. And so he, would come home, he would tell me things like he had to think of other women because he just couldn't get in the mood enough for me. He would tell me, all the toxic things, like because the dishes weren't done when he came home, it wasn't, it was enough to turn him off, things like that. And so I finally accepted that we needed to go to counseling and take that step and let somebody else in our circle. And at the time we were in Colorado, and because we had a heart baby. So at 20 weeks pregnant, we found out that he was going to need open heart surgery either very soon after birth or immediately. Thankfully, it was 3 weeks before his first open heart surgery. But so that was all going on at the time. He was in and out of that hospital for the first year of his life. He had 3 open heart surgeries. He ended up, by the time he was 1, on a trach and a ventilator. We had in-home nursing care. Like, life was very chaotic, but I also was raised to handle that all. So I was very much mature, juggling it all, giving time and attention to wherever it needed, and still being that perfect wife in the church world that I was raised to be. It wasn't enough for my husband. And so all that confusion and everything was going on in my head. And we went to counseling, and it seemed great. It seemed awesome. We'd go to counseling. He would understand what the pastor was saying. More would come out. He seemed to be talking and communicating. And then, we'd come home and the week was just the same. And especially the couple days leading up to their next counseling session were always the worst, because it was just, more fights. And, the counselor even gave me words at the time of what to say was going on. And because growing up, not having that value, I also didn't know how to express my feelings. So in this process, I was learning to express my own feelings, my own wants, my own needs, and what was going on. And so then I had that, what felt like, an armory behind me to say, hey, this is what we've been talking about in counseling. Why is this happening? Or this is what we need to do. And it would just, fuel that fire and make him more angry instead of helping and working through things. And so finally, for whatever reason, about 8 months in, I actually was pregnant again. So we were on our 3rd baby. I was about 4 months pregnant. I didn't know it was another girl, but our second was a girl. But he confessed to me that he had sexual desires toward our 1-year-old daughter at the time, and had ever since she was born. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know, it was never, obviously it was understood in our belief system that, abuse was him hitting you, or, abandonment where he just took off or something like that. But the details of what abuse actually meant and what that could look like in everyday life was never talked about. But I knew for me, that was what the line in the sand was drawn for me. And I left within a week. I had support from friends and family, and they helped me move and find a place, and I was gone. And so I since then have learned about abuse being, all those things, how he treated me. I should have left a long time ago. Never should have been putting up with that sort of treatment, that sort of, feeling invalidated and valued, and all of that. And so, but after that, even it continued when the church with, we were talking to the pastor and elders of the one church we were attending, and I was telling them what was going on. And I actually was shocked that they were telling me I had to stay. I had no business leaving. I got the U-Haul parked in front of my apartment. I'm gone. You don't understand. This is an FYI. Goodbye. This is not up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lot for me, because these were my elders. These are my seniors. These were men. I'm a woman. And I had to sit there and say what was what. And I just remember them saying, you really need to stay. And just looking at the car seat with my baby in it, and just being like, you want me to stay and put this little girl in that kind of danger? You think I can stop him from what he's saying he wants to do to her? And so obviously I just left that on the table. But the conversations after that were, I was up for excommunication, being told I was the wrong one, and that, I needed to go back. I needed to submit. I needed to be under my husband's leadership even still. And thankfully another church at the time, because it was important to me not to be excommunicated at the time, stepped in and, kind of talked it through the situation. But even that church later on, one of the elders even asked me, is there any chance of working it out with the father? And it just shocked me. I was just like, no, and thankfully the Sunday service was over, and I was done. I just left that day. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this church that supported me through this, and it was almost a couple of years later, still viewed me in that light of this horrible person who didn't value those marriage vows because of how dangerous he was. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a good chunk of my story.
So going back a little bit in your story, with your particular denomination, religious beliefs, and you said even before you got married that you went to counseling, and he admitted, that he had a porn addiction. Yeah. So, and then they kind of turned to you and are you okay with that? But is there a double standard? I mean, let's say that you were the one that admitted to having a porn addiction. I mean, would it be automatically, nope, you can't, okay. That wouldn't be okay. I'm just curious. I just feel I'm just having a very visceral reaction to this, because I just feel so much is put on women, and we can do no wrong, and yet it's all our fault. And so, I just interjected there, but was there a double standard as far as women were concerned?
I honestly don't know how that situation would be handled, because, I was so naive even at the time to everything I've processed since then. I've looked back on, in the moment, I thought it was handled just fine. Great. He's going to change. We've had a conversation. So I honestly can't say how that would be handled in that specific scenario where a woman would have a porn addiction, but definitely as far as, it's almost more that women just don't have those problems because we don't have a sexual drive, right. So that would be more of the case than them actually having a problem, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And also, and I know you know this, but I heard a couple times, I should have known. And it's but when we're raised in that particular way, you can't know. So
No.
I hope you don't heap on any guilt for yourself, because that's all his shit, like you, when we're raised in a certain, as in the way that you were raised, we can't know any different. We don't know any different. And so I want to say that, none of that was your fault and you couldn't have known. And anyway, for what
No,
that's
I
worth.
appreciate you saying that. No, I probably still say it that way just because that's how my story comes
I get
out.
it.
Because now I do, you do reflect and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just common sense now. How do I not?
Well,
And not even common sense, but it's so basic, our basic
yes.
human rights that we should be
Yes.
having and teaching our children. And so it's hard to look back and be like that. But no,
I get it.
I am totally, for me, and that's why I share, is because
Mhm.
like living under it's your responsibility to keep a family together as a wife. It's your responsibility to keep everyone happy. It's your responsibility to have all the basic needs met, plus make everything magical, on top of that, and organize that and facilitate all of that. Like it was a thing for me. And now, I mean, yeah, it is all on him. It is his problem.
Mhm.
It's the church's problem.
Right.
I can speak and help other people and change
Mhm.
their mindset. But yeah, I love how you said all that, because that's what I want everyone to, every other woman who's back there still trying to work out the chaos to feel. I want them to feel that freedom.
Yes, absolutely.
In the Leaning Forward conference that we just did, several of the women said about the patriarchy that the patriarchy is not just hurting women, it's hurting men as well. And it's his kind of fractured mindset about the whole thing too, that makes it hard to unravel, hard to understand, hard to diagnose. And then you were counseling with a pastor, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily a mental health professional, but they tend to take the path of least resistance, and trying to unravel that stuff. And we were pastors for 20 years. We kind of know about that. My question is, I've recently been taught by some friends of mine now that about abuse survivors, not abuse victims. Can you talk about the difference between those two in your mind, or from just your opinion?
Yeah, that's really a very unique question for me, because I think I have been an abuse victim for a long time. Would have been 10 years. I was married in January. So when this podcast airs, I guess. And so I stayed for three and a half of those years. And it actually took me 4 years before I even dated, just because I was so scared of getting things wrong. I still didn't understand a lot. Things hadn't come to me. A lot of my breakthroughs came from social media accounts, ironically, and still to this day don't even know how I started to find them, but and started how they post those, like meme quotes and phrases of things, and it just started to click, like, oh my gosh, that's the gaslighting I went through, and so for a long time, I think I was in a victimhood mentality in a huge way. That's how I feel that was, even though I didn't walk around saying poor me. But in my head, it was so much of my identity. I couldn't live outside of, I'm a single mom with 3 kids. And, I felt like things were always going to be a struggle, even though I'm the person to push through. I went ahead, I've bought my own house, had my own job, done all these things. It was still so much of my identity. And finally, I said, no more, very recently, actually. And I said, no more. This is not, my story can help and share or help people if I share it. And I can actually live outside of that, to where, you have to ask me instead of me just walking in and saying, hey, this is me, And so for me, I feel like there is a huge transition in the healing journey of being that victim and turning into a survivor, where it is truly in my past now.
So you say it's important for you to feel that first part, that victim part. I mean, someone did something to me, right?
Exactly.
And so,
yeah.
Do you think that in most religions, women, in a sense, are groomed to be victims?
Mm. I believe so in a lot of religious circles for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Like, with the patriarchy mindset, when you put someone else in power and control over another person, no matter if it would, if it's even children, I still struggle from my childhood in that mentality of actually accepting who I am. I'm a 30-year-old one adult in this world and I can act like it. I still struggle with that I am lesser than mentality, and that, I am actually capable of doing a lot of things because I'm an adult. And so that's kept me held back. And I think women are definitely groomed to, I always say that, I was just so lucky that a man finally looked at me. And that is a real grooming in the religious circles that I was in, where you were just so lucky to feel like I got picked, I got engaged. Men were so far above us in their value, So yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
What can you talk about some ways you're healing or some ways you got to that healing? What were some helpful things? What were some things you learned? What were some things you wish you knew, or however you want to address that?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing was dealing with like digging so deep into my feelings. Like, that was the biggest breaking point for me, was when I actually could start naming my feelings, and even my feelings from childhood, whether, a traumatic event happened to me. And there were traumatic events that happened to me, and sometimes they were big or little or just silly as a child, and that you couldn't process through, but actually being able to journal about them was huge for me. I would just type and type for hours and just work through all those thoughts and feelings and replay out the scenarios, and actually be able to, with no one's judgment, say how that made me feel, how that impacted me, and even the way I thought or perceived the world following that event. Things I wish I definitely knew were just character traits and toxicity. And, I think in churches especially, we just kind of assume everybody's good, everybody's nice. And even if, we know that not everybody is, the parents know to be on their guard, but that's not transferred to the children so much. It's not, you're all supposed to respect your elders. You're all supposed to, be kind, be nice, give everybody a hug, give everybody a high five, and go with it and just trust. And so instead of actually having, especially age appropriate conversations about a person's character or traits or behaviors that are happening and going on that are concerning, so that you can build that in a safe space before they have to go out and figure that out for themselves with their first boyfriend. So I think for me, like, just knowing, I hope to teach my own kids, what gaslighting is like. And I talk to them about that. They come home from school and talk about how a friend has said something or done something. We have, and I hope I'm, doing my best I can from even the knowledge I have, but just that little light of, well, that's not nice. We need to, this is what that does. And this is how it made you feel even, and going about it that way.
And I do think that, at least I'm seeing this with like our kids' generation, which I think you're a part of, because like our oldest is 32. But one thing I'm seeing, especially with our daughters, because they have children, is teaching us and teaching their children that they have the right to their own bodies, and that if they say no, even to me, their grandma, they don't want a hug, I don't give them a hug. Like, that is their body. And that was something that me growing up, that was not something that was communicated at all. And I wouldn't say that I was in a high demand religion, but it was just not, I mean, if you saw grandma or grandpa, you gave them a kiss when you saw them and when you left, whether you wanted to or not. So, I think that that really, even if not in a high demand religion type of situation, I do think that that can send really potentially dangerous messages to our kids, that they're not in charge of their own feelings, their own body.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Well, yeah, and my 5-year-old is really good about it. I think sometimes she uses it against me in the wrong areas. Like, no, come on, we gotta go. But she definitely uses her voice and says, "No, this is my bubble. This is my body." They even use it with their toys. I did not consent for you to take my toy. And sometimes it's over dramatic and funny, but and it's just cute to hear a 5-year-old say that. But it's so even empowering to my own inner child to hear that they have those boundaries, and they're learning how to use them. And that's all, and that's what's going on, is that they have that tool and they're just learning how to use it.
Yeah,
it's so empowering.
And to know that word consent at such a young age, that word has a lot of power. And yeah, so good for you for doing that, because I just think that is so, so important. And I do feel like that is something that your generation and maybe even people younger than you are starting to realize and instill in their children. And that's powerful, and that makes me hope for the safety of a lot of our kids.
Yeah, I've had talks with other girlfriends in my age group growing up in, maybe not the same churches, but same type of churches. And, we've talked back and forth hypothetically, because I personally was never put in that position, but I don't know what I would have even done as a child if I had been raped or molested or anything, because my voice was so pushed down.
Yep.
I don't even think, I wouldn't have screamed. I wouldn't have said anything. I wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And I can look back and see that, and so, no. And just knowing that word consent, I've learned a lot now too about just naming body parts and stuff is so empowering to a child, because their, predator, if they hear them say those things, it scares them enough because this child knows what's going on and they can talk about it. And so it's really cool to see them being able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in the Leaning Forward conference, we asked most of the women, we decided not to, have men and women speak this time, just all women spoke. And we wanted to elevate those voices, but we asked them, and some of them really didn't want to answer it, and some of them did. But the question was, what's your message to men? And what we mean by that is, what do you really need to tell men that, they're not getting? Or, most of the time we're afraid to say that to the patriarchy or whatever. What would be your message to men that you hope they understand? And like Janine said, this does not mean that we're bashing men or anything like that. We just need to have some clear communication for a while, right? And hopefully we'll get to better times. But what would you say?
I think it's something I honestly haven't thought about a lot, because I've been trying to heal myself and my own experience so much. But off the top of my head, the thing I think men, especially in my generation, need to hear is that they are whole the way they are too, just as women are, because like you said, that patriarchy has hurt them so much. They're trying to live up to this highly masculine standard that has been, shoved down their throats or modeled for them, when women want that, raw and intimate connection with them. And they're fighting in those same worlds too. And they just need to know that they're whole the way they are, and that they don't have to live up to all these standards women have been told that they have to live up to either.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I'm going to kind of take us in maybe a different direction. Maybe it's kind of a good segue, but can you tell us about the work you're doing now? So you have your story, you've done healing work. So where's that healing work taking you now?
Yeah. So, and just getting started, honestly, I've just been started, probably the last 3 months. So, my goal right now is to speak and just have my voice be heard as much as possible, share my story. I feel like that is, my most powerful tool right now. If talk one-on-one with people, which it's so ironic because once I, got over myself and said, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start sharing, people just in my everyday life started coming in front of me, whether it was, a client at the office I work at, or, something she just randomly opened up about her divorce, or, meeting other people on social media or whatever. They just started coming into my path more regularly, which has been phenomenal to talk with them. And be able to share more tools or just hold that space for them and just listen to them. Half of my healing journey and getting through my divorce was just babbling, just talking it out. And I had an amazing friend that held that space for me. And so, sometimes it doesn't all have to make sense right now, but you just have to spill what's going on in your head and get that out. And so, that's my goal, is to just hold that space for women to share my story, because I do believe it is impactful. I believe there are too many women who can relate to it, who can relate to especially the toxicity. I can't say that he was specifically a narcissist, but high toxicity, high, gaslighting and manipulation. And so unfortunately that's the case. And so I do speaking. I have my own podcast. I have been published in a couple of books as well. A third one on the way. I don't do one-on-one coaching. That's been recommended to me a lot of times because I am a single mom of 4 who works full time, and I just don't think that's in my cards right now to be able to devote that time to anyone. So,
Yeah. So I want to back up just a bit. Can you talk more about what does it look like to hold space for someone? Because I think we hear that a lot, and I like to think that I hold space for people as well. But when you talk about holding space, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. For me, and I use my own story and example, what I felt when I actually felt supported, was I didn't feel judged. The person, even if they hadn't lived through it, they understood that I was me in that moment and going through what I needed to go through, thinking through the things I needed to think through, because, like we talked about that victimhood mentality, I think sometimes we have to go to those extreme thoughts of, whatever it is, anti-men or whatever your story is for a little while to process through, anti-church, whatever it is, and to get back into a balance or think through. You have to see all the extremes and balances of it. And so for me, that's what that looks like, is just somebody say, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I get what you're thinking through, if you want, and some tools I've learned since even back then is asking people, do you just need to listen to you right now, or are we problem solving?
Yeah.
What do you need me to do? Because I'm a big jumper to problem solving when I hear people, and I get reined back in real fast when they have an aggressive response and go, oh, we're not problem solving right now. We're just talking. So that's been a big question to learn to ask too.
I think that's such a great quality of holding space, is really to just listen and not have that judgment piece or that fixing piece. It's hard because I think, as you were talking about earlier, most women that I know, and myself included, we want to be the one to rescue and fix the problem and make everybody happy. And sometimes what we need to do is just be in that space with that person and just let them basically word vomit whatever they need to say, and not pass judgment or, pass along any type of language that might seem like we're trying to fix their situation. Yeah. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, especially growing up in the religious circles, where we, weren't allowed to process those things, or it was such a demand for you to have the right religion, have the right thoughts. And, I wasn't in necessarily circles where you were, not allowed to associate with other people who didn't believe the same, but it was definitely like, be on your guard. So-and-so believes what, X, Y, Z. And so especially to hold that space for somebody while they're just processing
Mhm.
for me was so a new level of love I had never experienced.
Mhm.
So for me, that word's a little elusive when someone says to me, "Thanks for holding space," and I said, "Wait a minute, what did I do?" And so that's why I wrote that down a minute ago. But I did have an experience with some Benedictine sisters who called themselves spiritual directors or contemplative companions or something like that. And when they would talk to me, they would say, "What do you feel?" and "Where do you feel it?" And they would say, "Talk about that." So I'd start talking about that, and they would just say, they'd just kind of groan or something, and I I would stop and wait for them to give me some advice, and they didn't. And so I would keep talking, and then they also called it holding space, evocative listening, deep listening. That's another thing that a lot of people tell us is just we need somebody to listen to us, and one of the number one things the woman said to the men was, "Stop interrupting us and listen to us." So thanks for talking about that from your point of view of what that looks like. In some of it, we listened to a couple of your podcast episodes. Sounds like you're a pro already. It's just it was a lot harder for us, I would say, especially me.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's the Fierce Voice podcast.
Yeah. And you can probably find that on most platforms, or is there a specific platform that you're on?
Right now, it's only on YouTube and Spotify. Okay. I'm very new, and for whatever reason, every time I try to link the feed to any other things, it says there's an error occurred right now. So I threw up my hands and I said, "We're only on episode 3. I don't care right now."
Yeah.
So we will get that fixed shortly. But right now, it's on YouTube and Spotify or on my website. The feed is connected there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a little like that in the beginning, but once it's connected, then it's there.
Yeah,
forever,
exactly.
basically. So one of the things we like best about when people tell their stories and record a podcast, I think sometimes they think of it like a TV interview or something, but a podcast kind of lasts forever, and you can always, as you're going to do other things, you can refer back to that and say, "Well, listen to what I said. I won't have to say it again 1,000 times." It's a resource that stays there. So we like it. We think of it as our personal wisdom library, so we can go back to it at any time.
That's awesome.
Tell us more about how to reach you, how to find you. Where are you?
So my biggest platform right now is Facebook. I feel like the advocacy is really big on Facebook right now. And then Instagram, I am on LinkedIn. And then YouTube is where you can find my podcast as well. So just the basics.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we like to ask this question. We don't ever prepare. Actually, we don't prepare a lot for these podcasts.
We don't let people prepare much at all.
We don't prepare. We don't let you prepare.
It's more fun that way.
We like to wing it. But
best things are said like that.
One question we like to ask people that we're talking to is, if you had a billboard and you could put anything on that billboard, a message to the world, what would your billboard say? And it can be as long or as short as you want, because it's your billboard. So whatever you want.
I think mine would just say, "You are worthy," honestly, because in every area, every individual, no matter your gender, your upbringing, your place in life, we all struggle with self-worth.
That's such a great message. And I'm hoping, like, I see your generation and our kids' generation, and I'm hoping that sense of worth is something that we're going to see more of, because I just feel like with the things that we've talked about, that the generation coming up, there's just so much more of that, allowing people to be who they are, and that they're worthy, period, full stop. There's no conditions on that. And I just think that is going to be such a game changer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to see another individual just as they are and accept them regardless of what opinions you think you need to push on them. Like, because
Right.
there are none you should be pushing. They are who they are. So,
Exactly. I love that.
So Brigette Gildemaster, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on the podcast. We've enjoyed it. It went quick.
Oh,
Here.
it always does. Yeah.
Just buzzed by.
thank you. You guys are great hosts. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So for the listeners out there, we just want to thank you for tuning in. We thank you for supporting us throughout the year. It's been a great year. All the stats said that we did better than last year. So I don't know. We don't watch it too close, but we're excited that somebody's listening. And like we mentioned, maybe that these podcasts could be used for the people that record them, but also other people that just stumble upon them. We hope that they're beneficial, and we certainly get a lot out of listening to the stories. We want to invite you to keep listening and also be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
Remember, all who wander in the desert are not lost.
We believe all of our stories are sacred.
We are always here if you need someone to hear your story.
Check out our blog on Pathos and also our YouTube channel.
And stay tuned for our Leaning Forward conference.
Remember, we love you.
And be